Remember those old stories our parents used to tell us? Back in my day, we only had wet bread for dinner? Well, what if that was the harsh reality for the poor in the 70s, while the rich were feasting? See how their dinners weren't the same? Coq au vin. Sounds fancy, right? In the 1970s, it was the dish that made you feel like you served it at a dinner party. I mean, nothing screams, "I've made it," like slow-cooking chicken and wine. It's a traditional French dish that made its way across the Atlantic Ocean and became a massive hit in the United States. You could imagine a rich couple in the 70s pouring themselves a glass of Bordeaux thinking, "This is how the French do it, so we must be doing it right." But let's be real, half the people trying to make coq au vin back then were probably just wrestling with a giant pot and hoping for the best. I get it, and certainly you do too, because I can guarantee all of you had tried to make some special dish and inevitably failed at some point. And maybe this is the part where we picture our future selves saying, "Back in my day, we made coq au vin for dinner," while secretly knowing it was more like a chaotic chicken stew with wine we couldn't pronounce. It became a symbol of luxury, sophistication, elegance, and maybe even bragging rights at dinner parties. As for the poor, well, they were probably having a much humbler meal, maybe something that didn't take 2 hours and a full bottle of wine to cook. Bouillabaisse, a French fish stew with a name as fancy as it sounds, is one of those dishes that instantly makes you think of the Mediterranean coastline, where life is all about fresh seafood, sunshine, and laid-back lunches. But in the 1970s, it was starting to gain popularity in the United States as people became obsessed with Mediterranean cuisine. This wasn't just any fish stew. Oh no, bouillabaisse was like the diva of soups, demanding a mix of multiple types of fish, shellfish, saffron, and a good few hours of simmering. They just couldn't make one-pot dishes, could they? Can't you just imagine someone back then saying, "I'm making bouillabaisse for dinner," as if they were about to bring the whole of Marseille into their kitchen? It probably made everyone else feel like their canned tuna and noodle casserole just wasn't cutting it anymore. You might think I'm exaggerating, but I am not. The differences between classes were even bigger than today. But if you weren't wealthy, there was no way you were tossing in multiple kinds of fancy fish and saffron. Probably more like whatever was on sale, stew. For the rich, bouillabaisse meant living the good life, dreaming of yachts and French Riviera sunsets. For the rest, it was likely a case of fish sticks and wishful thinking. Chateaubriand. Now there's a dish that sounds like it was made for people who have personal butlers and live in homes with more bathrooms than bedrooms. In the 1970s, this thick cut of tenderloin wasn't just dinner, it was a status symbol on a plate. If you were serving Chateaubriand, it basically meant you had to be pretentious. It's like saying, "I'm not just having steak, I'm having the best steak." And you know what? It probably came with a side of arrogance too. While the rich were slicing into this ultra-tender, perfectly roasted piece of beef, you can imagine everyone else flipping their burgers on the grill and thinking, "Well, this is close enough, right?" Not quite. Chateaubriand wasn't just a meal, it was an event, often served with fancy sides and a sauce that likely took more effort to make than your entire meal. And I don't mean this as an insult to you. For the wealthy, this dish was all about indulgence and showing off. You can picture them in the 1970s, sipping on a glass of red wine, smiling smugly as they cut into their Chateaubriand, knowing that a simple steak just wouldn't do for their refined palates. Meanwhile, the average family might have been lucky if they even had steak on the menu at all. Kich Lorraine. Now that's the dish that made everyone feel like a sophisticated French chef in the 1970s. It wasn't just food, it was actually quite a statement. It had a buttery crust, creamy egg filling, and bacon. A true recipe for elegance. Kich Lorraine was practically the star of every fancy brunch. You weren't just making an omelet, you were baking art. And let's be honest, nothing said, "I'm fashionable," quite like casually serving quiche at a weekend get-together as if you just whipped it up in your Parisian kitchen. Très chic. In the 70s, Kich Lorraine was the go-to dish for those who wanted to impress without breaking a sweat. The rich were serving it at brunches like it was no big deal, as if everyone just had French pastries and quiche lying around. Meanwhile, others were probably staring at their regular simple scrambled eggs and wondering how brunch gets so complicated. For the wealthy, quiche was the brunch equivalent of wearing Birkin bags. It looked effortless, but you knew it took some planning. It was the dish that made something simple like an egg feel like a gourmet meal. And for anyone not in on the trend, well, a ham sandwich probably felt like the safe choice. Oysters Rockefeller. That's the dish that practically screamed, "I'm better than you, and I am not afraid to show it." Named after John D. Rockefeller, the wealthiest American of his time. But what does an oyster dish have in common with the richest man of the 19th century? Well, for starters, they were both rich, one in flavor and the other in monetary terms. Let me paint you a picture. You're at an elite event in the 1970s, the fashion is high, and so are some people around you. You're mingling with society's finest, and someone hands you a plate of oysters topped with butter, herbs, and breadcrumbs baked to the gods. You instantly feel like you've been invited into a world where caviar is an afternoon snack and champagne is just sparkling juice. Seems like a scene from The Dynasty or Eyes Wide Shut, depending on your part in the play. If you were serving it, you weren't just feeding people. You were reminding them of how exclusive their presence is. Meanwhile, for the average person, oysters were more of a special occasion thing, if that occasion ever happened. But how did this dish come to be? Oysters Rockefeller were created in 1889 in a New Orleans restaurant, Antoine's, by Jules Alchiatore. Jules had developed the dish due to escargot shortage, so he substituted escargots with the locally available oysters. While the wealthy were savoring these decadent bites, people elsewhere were probably digging into some simple shrimp cocktail and thinking, maybe someday. For those at the top, Oysters Rockefeller was the ultimate culinary flex, a way of saying, I eat like a Rockefeller, even if I'm not one, yet. Chicken Kiev. Now there's a dish that was all about drama in the 1970s. It wasn't just chicken, it was chicken with a little surprise inside. Imagine slicing into this perfectly breaded piece of poultry, and out oozes a rich, golden stream of herbed butter, like it's the grand finale of a magic trick. Back then, if you wanted to impress your dinner guests, Chicken Kiev was the culinary equivalent of a mic drop. This wasn't your average weeknight chicken breast. No, Chicken Kiev came with flair. It was like the original food influencer with its fancy presentation and that burst of buttery goodness. You can picture the wealthier crowd in the 70s serving it up at dinner parties with everyone oohing and eyeing as the butter spills out as if they just won the lottery. Meanwhile, for the rest of the world, it was probably more like, butter inside the chicken? That's a bit much, isn't it? But for the rich, it was all about the spectacle. They weren't just serving chicken, they were serving entertainment. And maybe that's why the new generations are having weight problems. But that's another topic. Sole Munier, proof that sometimes the simplest things in life are the most elegant. In the 1970s, this delicate fish dish was the darling of high-end restaurants, where the wealthy could enjoy a meal that felt both refined and effortless. A perfectly pan-fried sole drenched in browned butter, lemon, and parsley might sound basic, but it was the kind of basic that came with a hefty price tag. Ah, they almost made a healthy meal. So close! I guess the rich didn't care much about their cholesterol levels. Have you noticed that every meal is drenched in butter? Geez. It wasn't just about the taste. It was about the experience of eating something that looked like it belonged on a white tablecloth dinner setting. For the rich, Sole Munier was a way of saying, look, I don't need fancy sauces or heavy ingredients to impress. I can enjoy the simple things in life as long as they're expertly prepared, of course. Basically, it's like buying a simple white shirt, but make it high-end and pricey. You can imagine them nodding in approval as their plate arrives, knowing that simplicity never tasted or looked so good. Meanwhile, anyone not dining at these posh spots might have been staring at their fish sticks, wondering how on earth fish could be fancy. I completely agree. Not a big fish stan over here. For the wealthy, though, Sole Munier was the ultimate combination of understated luxury, light, buttery, and just pretentious enough to remind everyone that simplicity can still mean exclusivity. Fondu Bourguignon was the ultimate 1970s dinner party showstopper. Nothing brought people together like a pot of hot oil, skewers, and cubes of meat ready to be dunked and sizzled right in front of you. It wasn't just food. It was an interactive experience, the original do-it-yourself dinner before it was trendy. Guests would gather around a pot, spearing their beef or chicken, waiting for them to have that perfect golden brown crisp, and pretending not to burn themselves while trying to look cool. It was the height of social dining. Everyone huddled around one pot, casually chatting. If you were hosting a dinner party with Fondu Bourguignon, your status instantly elevated to cool host. For the wealthy, it was the ideal way to entertain, with the added bonus of not having to serve plated meals. You could just hand your guests some raw meat and let them do the cooking. Meanwhile, others were probably baffled, wondering if it was really necessary to dunk dinner in a vat of oil. But hey, in the 70s, this was peak sophistication. Filet mignon with béarnaise sauce, the epitome of gourmet dining in the 1970s. It was the kind of dish that made you feel like royalty, even though your kingdom might be a one-bedroom apartment. Béarnaise sauce, a classic French accessory to steak, is an emulsified blend of egg yolks, butter, white wine, and tarragon. Its overall sophisticated taste with creamy texture and aromatic herbs elevated the filet mignon to new levels. This made it a favorite among those who appreciated the finer things in life. Sounds like something Pam, Oscar, and Toby would serve at their Finer Things Club, and Jim would make fun of them for it. In the 70s, serving filet mignon with béarnaise wasn't just about enjoying a delicious meal. It was about showcasing sophistication and culinary abilities. It was as if your status magically evolved once you ordered filet mignon with béarnaise sauce. It was the equivalent of posting your dinner on Instagram, proof that you were classy and full of cash. So, basically showing off your money. Meanwhile, others might have been enjoying more modest and everyday meals, like a good old-fashioned meatloaf, spaghetti and meatballs, or mac and cheese. But for those who dined on filet mignon with béarnaise, it was a way to indulge in luxury. Moving to the East Coast, we are now presenting you with crab cakes with remoulade sauce. This dish was a staple of coastal elegance for anyone not wanting to, well, go to the coast. Crispy on the outside and tender on the inside crab cakes were considered a seaside luxury. Now let's talk a bit about the sauce. Remoulade sauce is a zesty, creamy, mustard-based sauce, which adds a punch to those crab cakes. And even though you weren't anywhere near the ocean, it made you feel fancy. But crab cakes weren't just about impressing the guests. They were also about embracing the East Coast culinary traditions. So even if you weren't at the beach sipping martinis, these crab cakes with remoulade sauce made you feel like you were. This delicacy is for you seafood lovers, so let me know if you try it because I certainly won't. Now, moving on to something a bit more commercial. Stuffed bell peppers. In some of the previous videos, we've mentioned stuffed bell peppers as a low-budget meal, which it is at the end of the day. But that doesn't mean that the wealthy didn't enjoy them every once in a while. They were culinary multitaskers. Stuffed bell peppers found their way into every kitchen in America, from lavish dinner parties to humble home meals. But how could that be? Well, they could be whatever you wanted them to be. Stuffed with ground beef and rice or quinoa and vegetables, they were endlessly versatile and adaptable. Quite a blank canvas they are. For the rich, stuffed bell peppers could be an elegant main course filled with fancy ingredients like wild rice, artisan cheeses, and maybe even a little lobster. Wow, they really knew how to elevate their veggies. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, stuffed peppers were equally beloved by families who packed them with simple ingredients, stretching a pound of ground beef or leftover veggies to feed everyone. So, whether you were having your dinner in a mansion or a one-bedroom apartment, stuffed bell peppers were an excellent last meal of the day. They were everybody's favorite because they could be turned into something fancy or something simple, and they still tasted cozy and like a true home-cooked meal. Now don't get confused, please. Pay great attention. Ratatouille, but not the animated rat chef, the dish. This is the rustic French dish that is all about celebrating the freshest summer vegetables. In the 70s, when all the foodies wanted to go back to basics, ratatouille was the right way to do so. If you're a big fan of veggies, unlike me, listen up. Imagine a mix of eggplants, zucchini, tomatoes, peppers, and onions, slow-cooked in olive oil, seasoned just enough. The smell will make you feel like a farmer in Provence, even though you just pulled 5 bags worth of groceries up the stairs. Unlike other dishes we mentioned so far, Ratatouille isn't about extravagance. It is about the quality of ingredients and letting them shine. It was served at high-end restaurants where every veggie had a specific place on a plate, but it was also popular with the people who had their own little gardens and wanted to make it at home. Either way, it was a winner. Rustic, wholesome, and really, really French, Ratatouille was proof that you could make a gourmet meal with just a few simple ingredients. Now, I know you are enjoying listening about rich people and their eating habits, but now we're moving to a different part of town where there isn't all that bubbly and sunshiny. Bean and cheese burritos, the dish that defines comfort on a budget. In the 1970s, money was already tight for some people, so these burritos became the go-to for families looking for something filling, tasty, with good nutritional value, plus easy to whip up. With just 3 ingredients, beans, cheese, and tortillas, you had yourself a meal that was filling and affordable. These burritos were like the culinary savior of low-income households. The beans brought the protein, the cheese added a little indulgence and fattiness, and the tortilla wrapped it all up like a blanket. Sure, it wasn't gourmet or elegant, but it was delicious. For those with low income, bean and cheese burritos were a lifesaver. While the wealthy were dining on escargot and steaks, others were rolling these up and probably enjoying every bite just as much. It was the ultimate comfort food that didn't need any fancy ingredients to make you feel full and happy. Bean and cheese burritos, proof that good food doesn't have to come with a high price tag, just a tortilla and some imagination. Spaghetti with marinara sauce, the ultimate low-income meal that took American kitchens by storm. At the time, Italian-American cuisine was gaining popularity, and all pasta-based dishes were taking over American homes. In the 1970s, this dish wasn't just a meal. It was a savior for families looking to feed everyone without affecting their budget. Simple ingredients like pasta, tomatoes, garlic, and sometimes a sprinkle of Parmesan if you were feeling fancy, and it fit the budget, came together to create a hearty, filling dish that left no one hungry. It was the kind of meal you could make in one pot, and boy, did it stretch. A big pot of spaghetti with marinara could feed an entire family and still leave enough for lunch the next day. Plus, who doesn't love slurping up noodles and pretending you're in an Italian restaurant, even if you're really just in your kitchen with mismatched plates? Spaghetti with marinara was affordable, comforting, and somehow always felt like a treat, even though it was probably the simplest meal on the menu. It's like the dish that said, you don't need filet mignon to feel full, you just need a plate of carbs and sauce. For many families, this wasn't just dinner, it was a way of life, a ritual of sorts. Coming home from work and preparing spaghetti gives a sort of nostalgic taste to the meal itself. Spaghetti with marinara sauce, the classic and reliable crowd pleaser. Cabbage and sausage skillet. Now there's a dish that knows how to make the most of what you have in the fridge. In the 1970s, when stretching the budget was a daily reality, this meal became a low-cost hero. Take a head of cabbage, throw in some sausages, and you have yourself a filling dinner that could feed the whole family without putting a dent in your wallet. Cabbage was like the ultimate vegetable, cheap, lasts forever, and adds a little zest to any meal. Paired with sausages, it transformed into something that felt a bit indulgent, even though it was easy on the bank account. Plus, there's something comforting about that sizzling skillet of cabbage and sausage filling your kitchen with savory, homey aromas, or disgusting smells, depending on your sense of smell. This wasn't just food, it was a strategy. The cabbage stretched the meal, and the sausage brought the flavor. And sure, it wasn't the fanciest dish on the table, but who cared? It was delicious, satisfying, and could easily be dressed up with some spices. The cabbage and sausage skillet was proof that you didn't need a lot of money to make a great meal, just a skillet, a little creativity, and a nose that could tolerate the smell of cabbage. Potato soup, the comfort food for when you're a little tight with money, but your stomach's rumbling for a home-cooked meal. This dish was highly popular in the 70s and for good reasons. Made with just a few inexpensive ingredients: potatoes, broth, maybe a bit of cream if you were splurging. Potato soup could warm you up and fill you up without making you worry about money. It was, and still is, the kind of meal where you didn't need much to make it special. Serve it with a slice of bread or some crackers, and all of a sudden, you've got yourself a cozy, satisfying dinner that tastes like home, especially on these cold fall evenings. And let's be honest, there's something magical about how a simple potato can transform into something creamy, rich, and oh so delicious. Potato soup was perfect for stretching the budget and feeding the whole family. Whether you spiced it up with a sprinkle of cheese or kept it classic with just salt and pepper, it was and still remains a winner. And the best part? You could make a big pot of it and it would taste even better the next day. Sloppy Joes. Now that right there is a dish that's as messy as it is delicious. In the 1970s, these saucy sandwiches became the go-to meal for families looking to fill hungry bellies, but without all the cooking and spending hours in the kitchen. With ground beef, a few seasonings, and some ketchup or barbecue sauce, you had yourself a meal that could feed a crowd. I remember when my mom made them, and I almost threw up from the amount of ketchup. From that day, I could never look at ketchup the same way. But it goes without saying that there's something truly fun about Sloppy Joes. They're like the food equivalent of a Friday night game night. Everyone's having fun, and there's a good chance you'll end up with a sauce stain on your shirt. Who needs fancy dining when you can dig into a soft bun overflowing with seasoned meat? For parents, Sloppy Joes were a lifesaver. They are a perfect choice for busy weeknights when cooking is the last thing you want to do and it feels like a chore. And with their budget-friendly ingredients, they were a favorite at every dinner table. So whether you were hosting a casual family night or just trying to get everyone's tummies full and happy, Sloppy Joes were the ultimate crowd pleaser. Simple, satisfying, and messy. Tuna Casseroles. In the 1970s, this dish was the ultimate family favorite, beloved for its adaptability and the joy of using whatever you had lying around. Got some leftover pasta? Throw it in. A few sad, half-moldy veggies in the fridge? Throw them in the pot. Tuna casserole was a one-pot dish that turned random cooking items into a meal. With a can of tuna, some cream of mushroom soup, a sprinkle of cheese on top, and a dream, you could whip up a dinner that felt like a warm hug on a cozy fall evening. And let's be real, who doesn't love a meal that can be made in less time than it takes to finish an episode of Friends? It was comfort food at its finest, creamy, cheesy, and easy to make. On top of that, you only had one pot to clean up later. Plus, there was an unspoken camaraderie among families, all enjoying their own version of this classic dish. It was like a casserole club where everyone had their secret ingredient: peas, corn, or even potato chips for a crunchy topping. That's where I draw the line, but if people enjoy throwing chips on top of a casserole, who am I to judge? Tuna casserole proved that dinner could be both simple and delicious, making it a staple in homes all around America. After all, if you can't make a great meal with a can of tuna, what can you do? Chili, the definition of a spicy meal that knows how to feed the masses. In the 1970s, this spicy dish became the ultimate spicy food staple and one of the family favorites, and for a good reason. Packed with beans, ground meat, tomatoes, and just the right amount of spice, chili was the perfect dish for big families or anyone who loved to eat like one. The beauty of chili is that it practically begs you to make a giant pot. You could whip up a batch big enough to feed a small army, with leftovers that would keep you eating for days. A true definition of a meal stretch. It was the original make once, eat twice dish. And let's not forget the best part. When you serve it, everyone gathers around the table, spoon in one hand and a stack of cornbread in the other, ready to dig in. You could jazz it up with toppings from cheese and sour cream to jalapenos, turning your bowl into a masterpiece of flavor. Chili was a one-pot dish that filled bellies and warmed hearts. Whether you like it spicy or mild, chili was, and still is, the ultimate comfort food for any occasion. Vegetable stir-fry, a reliable go-to for busy weeknights. In the 1970s, this dish became the perfect solution for those looking to whip up a quick and healthy meal. With a mix of whatever vegetables you had on hand, a hot skillet, and a splash of soy sauce, you could turn a jumble of produce into something delicious in no time. Imagine this: a colorful medley of bell peppers, broccoli, and carrots, all sizzling together, filling your kitchen with that delightful stir-fry aroma. It was the ideal way to use up those veggies that were starting to look a little lonely in the fridge. And let's be honest, nothing beats the satisfaction of tossing everything into a pan and watching it come together in a matter of minutes. What made vegetable stir-fry truly great was its versatility. You could customize it based on what you had, whether you wanted to throw in some tofu for protein or serve it over a bed of rice or noodles. Easy, adaptable, and quick to prepare, vegetable stir-fry was a simple yet satisfying meal that made it easier to get those greens on the table without much fuss. Plus, it was a great excuse to try out your best chef moves without the need for a fancy cookbook. Egg and rice casserole. Now that's a dish that knows how to make the most of what's in your fridge. In the 1970s, this versatile meal became a favorite for families looking to use up leftover rice and veggies without breaking a sweat. With a simple mix of eggs, rice, and whatever vegetables you had lying around, you could create a satisfying meal that brought everyone to the table. Picture this: a warm, comforting casserole baking in the oven, the smell spreading through the house, while you wonder how you managed to turn last night's takeout into something new and delicious. It's the kind of dish that encourages creativity. Throw in some broccoli, a handful of cheese, or even that half-eaten bell pepper. No judgment here. What's great about egg and rice casserole is that it's forgiving. Whether you're dealing with a bit of leftover chicken or just want to clear out the fridge, it welcomes all comers. Plus, it's hearty enough to fill up hungry bellies, but light enough to leave room for dessert. With egg and rice casserole, dinner became a team effort, making it easy to turn odds and ends into a family favorite. It's proof that with a little creativity, you can transform leftovers into something everyone will enjoy. Cornbread, the dependable sidekick at any dinner table. In the 1970s, this simple dish made a name for itself as a staple that paired perfectly with chili, soups, and pretty much any meal. With its golden crust and slightly sweet flavor, it was hard to resist a slice right out of the oven. Imagine a warm pan of cornbread cooling on the counter, just waiting for a generous pat of butter. It was the kind of comfort food that could take a regular weeknight dinner and elevate it to something special. Plus, it's great for soaking up all those delicious sauces from your main dishes. Cornbread is incredibly versatile, too. You can keep it classic, add jalapenos for a little kick, or crumble it into your soup for some extra texture. Whether served as a side or enjoyed as a breakfast treat, cornbread has a way of making any meal feel more satisfying. In a world filled with fancy breads, cornbread stands out as a no-fuss option that everyone loves. It's proof that you don't need complicated recipes to make something delicious. Sometimes, all you need is a simple mix of ingredients and a hot oven. Grilled cheese and tomato soup, the classic duo that's basically the ultimate comfort food. As fall rolls around, this pair makes its annual comeback, bringing warmth and nostalgia to chilly days. There's nothing quite like the sight of a grilled cheese sandwich perfectly toasted to golden perfection, waiting to be dunked into a steaming bowl of tomato soup. Let's face it, who doesn't love a little cheese-stretching action as you pull apart that sandwich? It's a simple pleasure that never gets old. Plus, it's the perfect excuse to indulge in a little childhood nostalgia, reminding us of cozy afternoons when a simple lunch could turn into a mini feast. Making grilled cheese is an art form. Too much heat, and you've got burnt bread. Too little, and you're left with sad, gooey cheese. But when you get it just right, it's a satisfying reward. Pair it with tomato soup, and you've got a meal that's easy to whip up and even easier to enjoy. Whether you prefer your soup smooth or chunky, this combo is always a winner. Grilled cheese and tomato soup is not just food, it's a hug in a bowl. Perfect for those fall days when all you want is to curl up and enjoy a comforting meal. Stuffed zucchini, a clever and budget-friendly way to make dinner a little more interesting. In the realm of family meals, this dish has often been compared to stuffed bell peppers, but zucchini has its own charm. When zucchini is in season, It's like the vegetable world's version of a blank canvas, just waiting for you to fill it with whatever deliciousness you have on hand. Think about it. Hollow out those zucchinis, and you've got the perfect vessel for stuffing. Whether it's ground meat, rice, or a mix of vegetables and cheese, it's an easy way to use up leftovers and avoid waste. Plus, the best part is that it's a low-cost option that can still impress. Making stuffed zucchini is almost like a cooking challenge. What do you have in the fridge? A bit of this, a little bit of that? Toss it all in. And let's be real, anything topped with cheese is bound to be a crowd pleaser, even if you're just trying to get your kids to eat their veggies. So the next time you're in the mood for a meal that's affordable, filling, and a little fun to prepare, reach for those zucchini. Stuffed zucchini might just become your new favorite way to turn a simple vegetable into something special. Fried Bologna sandwich, the ultimate poor man's steak. This classic meal has been a favorite for those looking for something quick, filling, and easy on the wallet. With just a few slices of bologna and some bread, you can whip up a hearty sandwich that brings back memories of simpler times. Imagine this: a slice of bologna sizzling in the skillet, edges curling up and developing that irresistible crispy texture. Add some mustard or mayo, slap it between two slices of bread, and you've got yourself a deliciously nostalgic meal. It's the kind of sandwich that doesn't need any frills. It's all about comfort and satisfaction. What's great about a fried bologna sandwich is its versatility. You can dress it up with cheese, throw in some pickles, or keep it simple, whatever your heart or pantry desires. It's a meal that works just as well for lunch as it does for a late-night snack after a long day. So the next time you're looking for something that's quick, cheap, and sure to hit the spot, reach for the bologna. It may not be fancy, but it sure does the job. And who knows? You might just discover that this poor man's steak is a gourmet experience in disguise. As we wrap up, remember, it's not about the price, but the joy in every bite. If you love this video, be sure to like, subscribe, and share your go-to comfort food in the comments.